Welcome back to the show. My name is Dan Hafner. Thank you again for joining, or thank you to any new folks who are joining this show for the very first time. Um, I am joined today by another great guest, Leanne Linsky, who is the founder of this platform called Plausible, which is going to be really, really interesting. I'll tell you more about it here in a second. But first, business first. If you wouldn't mind rating, reviewing, subscribing, setting up notifications, sharing the show, anything that you can do wherever you are watching or listening to the show, whether you're on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, anything like that. Please, please, please rate, review the show. That really, really helps the algorithm, helps us grow, helps us get more viewers, more listeners, wherever that is. So that is my first order of business that I always start everything with. So if you've already done that, great. Thank you very much. If not, please subscribe. Please do anything like that. Or share this episode or this show with anyone who you think might gain value out of it, because we're always trying to help more and more people. So, with that out of the way, let's bring in Leanne. She is, like I said, the founder and creator of this platform, which is actually a comedic tech platform for connecting comedians and fans and doing streams. And it's a really, really interesting idea. And I'm really excited to learn more about it. So, welcome to the show, Leanne. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. And I've been looking forward to our conversation to talk all things plausible, all things tech, and how things get done.
I mean, you're a perfect fit for the show. We love to talk about tech platforms, talk about the backstories, the successes, the failures, maybe the lessons learned, all of that stuff. But before we get into that stuff, tell us what is plausible. Like, how did you get into this world of comedy and end up being turning that into a tech platform? Like, how did this thing come to be?
Well, okay, so Plausible is exactly that. It's a platform. It's an online comedy club where comedians can create their own account. That we provide them with all the scheduling tools, the ticketing services, the virtual stage, and they
So
get a
cool.
profile, all that stuff. And then fans log in and they can, you know, think of it as like a Netflix, but everything is in live in real time. So kind of if you think to back when you used to watch TV and things are on at a specific time of day and you had to be home to watch it, same thing happens here. And the comedians can see and hear their entire audience and vice versa. So everybody can see and hear each other. So it's super interactive rather than passive. Because in comedy, that's really important to get responses in real time. That's why we do it. And how did I get into it is a story in itself. I took my very first comedy class back in 2001, so over 20 years ago, and I ended up taking that class because I was working for a Fortune 500 at the time and I wanted to improve my speaking skills and things like that. And then I ended up taking classes at the Second City Training Center, and it just snowballed into this thing. And I've just immersed myself fully into the comedy world. And before COVID happened, I was moving from New York City to uh, the LA area. And once I did that, I was like, whoa, I'm spending more time on the freeway than I am on any stage. How do I solve that problem for me?
Mm.
I was like, maybe I'll do things via Skype. Remember Skype?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And people were like, Skype. And I'm like, okay, you're right. And then I had this idea that I wanted to do things online. And I was using Zoom for work. I was working remotely as a director of marketing for a voiceover studio in New York. And we were using Zoom all the time. And I'm like, maybe I'll do it using Zoom. So finally, in like the summer of August 2019, I was like, I'm finally going to do this because I had been producing shows in person and podcast. I had started podcasting and doing all that. I'm like, no, I really need to get this online mic going because I need more time to work out my jokes without spending hundreds of dollars in gas and also hours, millions of hours in traffic. I mean, because if you've ever spent any time in Southern California, that's what you do.
Yeah.
I have to go to the grocery store. See you in 2 days. Um, so I started doing it and comedians were like, "Oh, wow, this is really cool." And this is 29 August 2019 BC before COVID. And they were like, "Hey, this is cool because now I could connect people and when comedians want to travel and stuff, they always want to know who do you know in another state that I'm going to." So this was a good networking thing as well. And then COVID happened. Everybody went online. Um, and during the time when I first started my mic, I'm like, hey, this is great, but there's nuances and things that we need as performers that existing technology doesn't provide. So how do I scale that? So I had applied to go back to school and get my master's in innovation and entrepreneurship, got accepted to University of California, Irvine. So during COVID, I actually went back to school, and then I got involved afterward. I got accepted into an incubator, then an accelerator, and another accelerator, and another.
Wow.
So I built my team, and I'm a non-technical founder. And it took me a long time to find the right people to build. And I found a wonderful group of people that I still continue to work with that really understood my vision and brought it to life. So that's kind of the short, long story of how we got here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Um, wow. There's so many different ways to go. That's a really, really cool and interesting kind of way through. I didn't know that you guys had, went going through an incubator and all that stuff, like type of stuff. We've talked about, people that have raised funding and stuff like that on the show. Um, but that's interesting. That's a little detour maybe. What did the incubator do for you? How long into this process of launching this did you get into an incubator? How did that help you? What did you come out of it? Learning and being able to do.
Right. So when I started this, before I went to school, I created my very MVP, my very minimum viable product, which was using existing technologies. And I cobbled and duct taped them all together, if you will,
Mhm.
to create something that kind of like streamlined the process for open mics and what we needed. Right. So then when I was in school, I experimented with that. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of other things around my demographic. And I have a two-sided marketplace essentially. So what do each of those want and need in order to make this work? And based on what I have, what are they getting? What do they want? What are they missing? So,
Hmm.
uh, so when I got accepted into the incubator, it was the Wayfinder incubator at UCI. I was what you would call very, very early stage startup because I hadn't built anything, but I had a plan and I had something that showed a proof of concept and people were using it. And so I did that, and that's how I got accepted, right? I had to go and I had to pitch, and then the incubator process was, I can't remember how many months it is. It's like, I don't know, 3 months, let's say 12 weeks or something. Uh, I may be wrong. I can't remember. Everything's like a big mess up here, but
Yeah.
that, um, and then from there, because in an incubator, we get mentor assigned to us. We have access to other resources, people who have expertise in accounting or people who have expertise in pitching and financial forecast and whatever. So I would attend all of these different workshops because each week is kind of like incubators can be, they're structured, but it's kind of a self-service. So you get into it, what you get out of it, what you put into it. If you don't show up and you don't go to the things, you don't network with people, chances are you're not going to get anything out of it. So I showed up to as much as I possibly could and talked to people. And in doing so, a board member from an accelerator, a fairly new accelerator, a Long Beach accelerator, was like, "Hey, you applied, right?" And I'm like, "I'm applying right now," and applied to an accelerator. But that also came with pre-seed funding. So I went through the whole application process, the interview, the pitch, the whole thing, got accepted, which was significant because now I could hire people and build my version of my product. So I thought, okay, I can hire someone tomorrow, but it took a lot longer than anticipated, even though I already knew who my first hire was going to be and that kind of stuff. It took a long time to hire. It took about 6 months to
Mhm.
get it. Yeah, yeah, it's a little tricky, and depending on who you hire, and yeah, there's a lot of things that you don't know until you do it in order to get things moving. But we did that, and then we were able to go into development and build things. And of course, in my mind, that should take a day, but I'm a non-technical founder. So everything is like, oh, that's, takes time. And then, so eventually so it took probably 6, 7 months, and a lot of people working on it. There's a lot of us, and then launched in December of 2022, and then this past year it's just been, inviting people to onboard and get using it and everything. So, but after that accelerator, I was also part of yet another accelerator because I moved from Southern California to Seattle, and when I got here, going to networking and everything, I found, I wanted to make sure I immerse myself into the entrepreneurial ecosystem and be around other people doing these things and making sure I could connect and find people that I needed to grow the business. So I met some people with WTIA, which is Washington Technology Industry Association, and they have a founders program that's basically an accelerator. So I applied and I got into that as well. And that was wonderful because again, they're structured, but it's self-serve. Like you have to show up, you have to participate, you have to get things out of it. And so I did all of those things too along the way.
Interesting. Okay. No, that's good. That's good to know because I've never been in an incubator or accelerator. I thought about it with my very first project, and I decided not to do that. But no, that's good to remember. It's like, hey, like these are great, vehicles to go faster, obviously, an accelerator. But you got to show up and do the work. It's not like like you said, it's not just like I join this thing and then boom, I take off and go. There's still work involved. So that's very interesting. So let's go back to the platform a little bit. So tell me, like, I'm very interested in this because I think when you said that it's like the Netflix now, like like there's shows that start at certain times. It's not like I can just like Netflix, just like put something on at 1 a.m. if I want to, and it's just on. You know what I mean? But I remember they said like back in the day, Game of Thrones like brought back this like network, like this religious, like, hey, this is on at 8 o'clock on Sunday nights, like or whenever it was like that. That's a very interesting like dynamic to bring back. So I'm interested, like, do you see, is there more anticipation, is there more success with that model, meaning that it's like these people have to be there at scheduled times, or is that more of a challenge? I'm interested.
Well, with comedy, if you go to a show at a club, you have to be there at a certain time.
Right.
So I think audiences and comedians are used to the show happens in real time.
Yeah.
You have to be there for it to happen. That's kind of part of it. It's an experience rather than a passive, I'm just going to throw this on while I vacuum my house. Well, does anyone vacuum? No, we have Roombas, but uh, you know, like those kind of things. It's not, it's an experience that you want to partake in. And the idea with Plausible is there can be multiple shows happening at the same time, and they can happen at any time of the day throughout 24/7 because we're not we're not limited by a geographic location. We have access to the entire world. So we have comedian join us from India the other evening on our open mic. We have people from Canada, we have people from Ireland, we have people from Sri Lanka, we have people like from all over the world. So they're
Wow.
in different time zones. So, they're like getting up at 6 a.m. to join something in the evening here. So it all depends. And why not have live comedy available on your lunch hour at work and have a sandwich while you consume, joy? Like, why not have those things?
Hmm.
So, so yeah. And in comedy, although social media has been really popular and a lot of comedians have been posting, clips and things like that. Um, Great. Likes are great, but they're not paying the bills necessarily unless you have a minimum number of followers, depending on the platform that varies. And it varies on, do you get money based on sponsorships or influencer ads, those kind of things. But that comes with a lot of time and really good content in order to get to that level. Um, and you don't get feedback in real time. And as a comedian, I want to know right now, is my joke working? Are you laughing right now? And and we have to sit and wait for those comments or a like to come in and be like, oh, good, I'm validated. But did people really watch it? Because some people just scroll. And did you ever just scroll? You accidentally like something you didn't mean to like, that
Mm,
kind of stuff. So we live for in real time laughter and response. And you don't get that on many technologies, even on live situations. It's let's stop and read a chat. You can't do two things at one time like that. It's two different sides of the brain.
yeah. So is it, admittedly not having, actually gone into the platform I was, for those of you just listening, I was actually at the beginning going through and actually screen sharing like the actual landing page and in the sign up page for Plausible. So if you're not watching on Spotify or YouTube, like go back and check that out because you can actually see it. But the link will be in the show notes as well. So is it a little bit like a Zoom for comedy, or is it like can you kind of give us a behind the sneak preview of like what the experience is like?
Sure. So the thing that most people are most familiar with is Zoom. So if you think in terms of Zoom, where you can see and hear other people in real time, similar, right? Except we had to make some changes because our needs are different than what they might be for a typical meeting or class or something, right?
Right.
So we can't do one-way audio. We want to feel the room. So I want to be able to hear everybody laughing at the same time. And on Plausible, we can do that. Like if someone coughs, it doesn't cut everybody out. Everybody's frame is lit up because everybody's sound is coming through. And that makes a big difference
Mhm.
because it brings the energy in. So we encourage people, turn your audio on. We want to have that energy in the room. We want to hear you laugh without it cutting off my punchline or the beginning of another joke. So we have that element to it. But we also have an element of how we've designed the screen layout. And that will be something that's also, there'll be more changes probably coming to that in the future. But one of the things that if we go on something that we're familiar with on some of these other platforms, and you mentioned Zoom, if you go into gallery view and someone's a speaker, who are we watching? We're watching whoever's most interesting. And if someone's walking around, I guarantee you all eyes are on the person walking through their house or going through or whatever they are, because whoever's Blair Witching us, I'm sorry, but they win. So that's where our eyes go. And whoever has the most interesting thing happen, it's just normal. As a performer, I get that. And so what I wanted to do is make sure the performer has focus and the host has control of the room. So the performer is larger than everybody else and anchored to a specific space on the screen. And then if you go in and you look at your audience, you can carousel through the audience with a wheel on your mouse if you hover over the audience side,
Hmm.
and then they carousel through. Because if you go into a comedy club and you're sitting in a chair in the third row, how many audience members do you see? You don't see everybody behind you, but you hear them. You don't hear everybody over to the left or the right, but you see only a handful. And then of course the dominant person. And I have to cough, so I'm sorry. But that's why we created the screen in which we did. So you can pan and scroll. Like if you were to turn your head, you can do that without having to click through to another screen or anything like that. But the person keeps focus of whoever's actually is performing. And people
Wow.
can be to and from a stage. So the audience, that person can, we call it bringing to the virtual stage. Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. I mean, I kind of think about like I don't know if it's big anymore, but my mind kind of goes to like the Clubhouse type of stuff, but more like but more advanced and definitely with audio and a lot like better features, it seems like.
Exactly.
Very
Right.
cool.
Became so popular during COVID, especially. It was like the giant party line. That's what it made me think of from the 80s, where it's like, oh, I can hop on this party. Remember that? I don't know. Maybe you're too young.
I wasn't around in the 80s, unfortunately. Sorry, I'm a 90s baby, so you can't relate to that one. Sorry.
So when we had landlines, uh, I
I remember those. I remember those.
we had landlines, and then they had this thing where you could do party lines, and you had to pay for it, and you could get all the different. This is before like call waiting, right around that time.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
You could add people to the line, and it's like, oh, who's this? So that was a big deal. But that's what Clubhouse made me think of, is a giant party line. Like they scaled that um
Hmm.
in a way, yeah. But this has all of those things. People can come in and like some of the other technologies that are out there, everybody can use the technology and put their classes and things up. But with Plausible, we also it made it so that there's a like a TV guide, right? Like if you're familiar with
Yeah.
that, or show listing, you have your show listings, right? And you also have your talent directory. So you can go through and look at everybody and see who you want to follow so that we can kind of populate your favorite, like these are the comedians you love, here are their shows, and then here's other shows you might be interested in. And you can also sort by like what types of comedy you want, what types you like. Mhm.
Hmm. Wow. Very,
Yeah.
very cool. So this is really a plug and play type of solution for comedians. It seems like that's really neat. I'm curious, does anyone do simultaneous like shows through Plausible, but also like in person? Is that even possible?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's totally
Hmm.
possible. So, um, we just met with some really cool people the other day. They do improv, which I spent years doing improv, and they're like, "Can we, do that on here?" I'm like, "Of course you can." And I think the two gentlemen are in two different locations in the world, and then they do the improv together from yeah.
Hmm.
So really hoping to see that. I know another comedian. There's several improvisers on board, so I think they're looking at how to do that because they've been experimenting with other technologies and they're like, oh wait, but this has all the things. I'm like, yeah, because with Plausible, you can also integrate OBS. So if you want to up level your production value, OBS is the uh, open broadcast system, right? And you can get a
Yes. Yes.
version of it. And I always forget, so, and it's fantastic software. You can download a free version of it, use it. And once you do the initial setup, and we run free help sessions to help comedians get that integrated. And then once you do that, it's just like a click of a button and you can have your video play behind you. You can do like we have right now, where you have the immersive background. You could do those kind of things. I could play an intro and outro video to my show. I can share screen. I could have sound effects. Like I could do all of those things. So depending on people's tech skills, some people are like, nope, fine with all of this. And I'm like, great. And then other people want to step it up. Great. We can help you get that all set up. Yeah.
Wow.
It's really fun.
It sounds like it. It's very, very exciting. So I'm curious, like, how do you see, and this kind of goes to your company vision and stuff, but like, how do you see Plausible affecting the future of the comedy industry? Is this the direction that, is this where the next, Kevin Hart's going to come from? Is this where, the next, is this, what do you foresee this becoming in the future?
Yeah. All of those things. Like, I would love to have someone be, I want the comedians, all of my comedians on Plausible to be, I say they're not mine. Um,
Well, I mean, it's like,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you're their little family. You brought them in.
And they've created such an awesome community on there. And going back to your thing, like have people done things at the same time. They're very conscientious of like, oh, someone else is doing a show at that time. I don't want to do it at the same time. I'll do it right before or right after. That kind of stuff. And they're very
Mhm.
giving to one another, which I'm just so impressed. And um, but yeah, I want them to succeed. And that's the other thing with Plausible is that I wanted to kind of flip the business model because a lot of people, if you're not a comedian, you may not know that comedians typically don't make money. And when they do, we don't make a lot of money. So how do we change that so it's not a pay to play system? A lot of times we had to pay to do open mics. We have to, $5 for 5 minutes. We have to barter for our stage time and work for the club and get X number of people to buy tickets and 2 drink minimums in order to get that many minutes of stage time. And even as you move up in the ranks, you get a flat fee, and sometimes you get a burger and a beer. It's not sustainable for a living necessarily until you get to a certain level. And there are people who do that, but we want to make it even more equitable and democratize it even more. So that's why, like with our ticketing services, even if you sell $1, you're making the majority of that ticket revenue, right away. There's no minimum requirement. There's no, once you hit this bar, you have then we'll, give you a little something. No, if
Hmm.
you're out there, hustling, like, of course, if one person comes and buys a ticket, we do a split at the door. And a split at the door typically doesn't happen unless you're a bigger name, you know? And so I kind of got away from your question a bit, but yeah,
That's okay.
there's all of these ways that our community can kind of come together, and by everybody creating a free account, then what I do as the club, if you will, the tech platform, is I share about what you're doing in our newsletters to all the fans on our platform, not just your fans, but everybody's fans. And then their fans hear about this and their fans hear about this. So it gives everybody an opportunity to grow their fan base on a different level, because a lot of times clubs will only promote the bigger known names, which makes sense. And what if you're not known, but you're doing something really cool? People should know about that too.
Yeah, I can definitely see like do you have any like cool success stories of anyone like shooting to stardom or anything through the platform yet or anything?
Uh, no, I have really cool people who have done other things that have come to Plausible, and so I feel like we're still really young,
Okay.
and like people are, and the comedians are like getting their feet wet in the tech, going, "What can I do with this? How can I, how can I do something different? How can I get creative?" So we've had people come in and obviously do mics. There's been a lot of mics as people are get familiar, and then they're like, "Oh, okay." Oh, wait, I could do shows? Yeah. So now they're doing shows. And it's like, wait, I don't have to do just this kind of show. So we have people experimenting with podcast. So if people who have a large podcast following, like, come do a VIP session, let your fans know they can be in the room during a recording. You could do a Q&A with them. It changes the vibe of the room. You could sell tickets to it. So monetize your podcast,
Mm.
record it on Plausible, then download and distribute, start earning money sooner here, and it doesn't take away from anything you're already doing. And the same with, like, there's um comedians doing fundraisers for their favorite charities, which is really cool. So people are doing that. And then, like, another comedian out of Canada, there are no late night shows in Canada on TV that come from there. They've had a few, but they didn't last.
Hmm.
And so this comedian, Kelly Zamnikis, she is starting a midweek late night show, and that's coming in February. And she's has her first chair, the band director, who is the Velvet Duke. So she has a musician, and then she has her first guest already picked out, which is a comedian out of Montreal, Monica Hamburg. And they're doing their first show. It will be like 30 minutes, and they're selling tickets at only $5. I mean, that's less than a coffee. So that's pretty. I'm excited to see what she does. Now, a little bit about Kelly. She's been doing comedy I just talked to her the other day and interviewed her. She's been doing comedy for about 8 years, but she decided she was going to do a documentary. She wanted to do a documentary about the 9/11 first responders. She's in Canada, and I wrote, there'll be an article about it on Plausible's blog, but she was watching Jon Stewart and learned about it a lot about it during there. And she's like, in Canada, we didn't hear as much about it. And she's like, I thought we should do a documentary. And so she reached out to, I think it was John Feel, and he was like, yeah. She ended up producing No Responders Left Behind with Jon Stewart that just came out on streaming services. Like,
Hmm.
she's a go-getter. And I look at people like this and talent like this that's coming onto Plausible, that maybe you don't know her name, but she's amazing and she's doing really cool things. So there are hundreds of comedians on Plausible, and now as these comics are like, oh, I have the freedom to do this. That now they're just starting. I'm seeing more of producing.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Um, so this is really interesting. I didn't plan on asking you this, but it's very cool that you have this idea, right? And then you did the work required and all this type of stuff. We've actually talked less about the technical aspects, which is what I usually talk about. It's just because I'm so interested in this platform. But you go on and you build this thing, right? And what's crazy is you're just talking about this, what you just talked about, all these people that come on and they get their feet wet or whatever. And then it's like a light bulb goes off, or they see something and they're like, oh, what if I could do it this way? Right. Because at the end of the day, a directory and marketplace is kind of like this, where there's multiple pieces of talent. There's always going to be flooding, and you still have to do different things to stand out as a content creator, because it's not just you're the showcase, right? It's not just built for one person, right? So, like, so I guess my question that I'm getting to is, could you even foresee all of the potential, business opportunities, revenue opportunities, offshoot opportunities when you first built this, right? Because it seemed like you said, like, you were stuck in traffic, you just needed a way to get more mic time than windshield time, right?
Yeah.
But now there's just all these externalities that you've built in this whole ecosystem of something that, I mean, some of these ideas have probably cropped up in the last couple of months. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, can you, like, how do you continue that? Like, how does that innovation work? Is it just through seeing what people do on the platform? Is it through direct communication with them? Like, once you've reached this level of, like, I got some people in here doing some things, what do you have a process? Do you have an idea of, like, how you go through that and kind of get different ideas to improve the platform, or to bring on new features, or do different things at all?
Yeah. So I spend a lot of time. Um, some people may be like, "Oh, you spend too many times with your users." I find
I
it,
don't think
and
that's possible.
I agree with you 100%. It's impossible. I they are everything, and they're the reason I did this, right? I
Hmm.
mean, I did it initially because I meet my issue, but my issue is their issue, and their issues are my issue.
Yeah.
So, I think I learn the most from watching them and hearing them and listening. And I make a point of, especially with UX design, like, we're going to be making some changes and everything. Again, it's never done. It's a work in process,
Yeah.
uh, always. And I think that with anything, even in art, like, things aren't done. It's constantly evolving. And that's just part of the journey. But to your point, how do I come up with these use cases of what this could be used for? A lot of it, this is all I think about 24/7. And I'm like, oh, if I had this, then I could do this. If this, then that. But even just with what we already have, there are so many possibilities. So what I do is, I find when people ask me, I'm like, yeah, of course you can. My answer, and they're like, "Is this possible?" I'm like, "I'm pretty sure anything is possible. Why don't we try it? Like, let's experiment." I love experimenting with things, because when we look at things, especially as an experiment, it's not a matter of, like, does it succeed or fail, but, like, what happens?
Mm.
What what do we learn from it, right? And it takes pressure off. I'm like, well, let's experiment. Let's see what happens. And, well, it's like, people, can we improvise on here? Let's see what happens. Like, what if we found a whole new way of doing that, that hasn't been done yet? Even better. I don't know. I just think that tech is just as an art form in a lot of ways. And for have creative people come on here, instead of be scared with it, I reach out to people, right? When I see that they're showing up, and maybe they're curious, but they're not doing it. It's like, you know what? Explore, play, try all the buttons, do all of the things, see what they do, and create test shows, create practice, create rehearsals on here. Don't say I'm doing a show and show up for the very first time expecting everything to work on a tech platform without doing a rehearsal first. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, who are these people? So I spend a lot of time reaching out and saying, hey, I see you're doing a show, you know, have you considered a rehearsal? Have you considered a practice run? Have you done this? And they're like, oh, I can do that. Absolutely, you can. So a lot of times it's not so much that they don't have the ideas. They think they need permission, or that they're not allowed. And so I'm trying to make sure they understand they have the freedom to go and do these things and try them out. And I also see people with potential, and it's like, tell me a little bit about what your goals are and what you're, working on. And, like, I had this great conversation, like, I mentioned Kelly, and I'm like, "What are you working on?" She was sharing with me. I'm like, "Have you considered doing that on here?" And she's like, "Oh, I can do that." I'm like, "Yeah, let's go," you know? And so It's kind of like putting the things together instead of thinking, how people view success. So it's like, well, I saw an example of one person, so therefore I must follow that path. There's a million paths to be successful. Choose your own adventure, And I think
Hmm.
that's how I see plausible is I think there's a ton of different use cases. And I chose to focus on the comedy demographic. One, that's what I know really, really, really well. But two, comedy is like the second largest live streaming genre, only second to breaking news.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Comedy is super popular.
Huh.
And because you mentioned like doing things in real time. People love live stream because it's more personal, it's more intimate. It brings you closer to the content creator. Like if your favorite comedian was on Plausible, or your favorite podcaster was on Plausible, to pay, a few bucks and sit at home in your living room and be seen and heard by that person. What are you kidding me? I like, and also if you know that it's going to be live in real time and there's not a recording of it, maybe not. Um, you don't want to miss it because like, what if something happens and everybody's talking about it tomorrow? There's a FOMO associated
Hmm.
with it. So there's a lot of really cool things that and there's and then if it works for comedians, why doesn't it work for spoken word? What about storytellers? What about solo musicians? What about you know more than that? Like the possibilities, I think, are endless. This is just the start.
Yeah, I would agree with you. One of my initial thoughts, 20 minutes ago when you were talking about stuff, I'm like, there's so many more use cases to what your software already is. So that's a really, really cool. So there's a big opportunity there down the line. But one thing I wanted to pick up with before we go into the next thing was, that was really interesting when you said, like people don't either know that something's possible in the platform or they think they need permission for it. And like from the mind of like a software person, of someone like I'm building and launching a platform right now, and there's so many things that I've built into it that I haven't even communicated to the users. It's like, hey, look how cool this thing, and you know what I mean? It's so I think that there's really the importance of just of communicate. It's a people game at the end of the day, right? It's like if they don't know it exists, then how can they ever benefit from that and that type of thing? So I just wanted to pick up on that. That was a really interesting note there. But one thing I did want to ask you about before we close out was the topic of AI. Um, are you guys already including any kind of AI? I know like there was a recent, writer strike in LA, and there was a lot of the concerns around the image and the likeness, and how AI is coming into all this conversation, and no one really knows kind of how all this is doing in the future. Is that affecting the comedy industry, like this AI revolution? And if so, is there anything that you guys are doing or to combat that or help that or anything like that at all?
There are things that I would love to build into the platform to benefit the comedians. More to be revealed in that. But it's interesting to see how it's affecting the community now. There's chat about it, like there's conversations about it. And I think people have dabbled a little bit in the AI. So for instance, the other night someone came to the mic, had never done stand up before, and then he's like, I'd like to try something. We're like, great. And he did it. And we're like, wow, that was really good. He had a really good delivery about it. And he's like, to be totally transparent, I tested AI to see what they could write for me. He goes, so I did not write that. That came from AI. And everybody was like all my regular comedians were like, oh no, you can feel the thing. But but I think this is really important. And I was so appreciative. I'm like, first of all, thank you. Thank you for being so transparent. I think that's super important. And I think
Mm-hmm.
transparency is extremely vital. So my key takeaway from that was the transparency involved. Number two, the jokes, I AI is designed, it's only going to get better, right? Like the learning models and everything, the more data that they have, the better they become, right? So it will evolve, it will get better, it will be really good. But I think transparency is key. I also think how a- it's like with a lot of tools out there, um, they can, it's like with responsibility comes with power comes great responsibility,
Mhm.
right? So we have these things, but we have to be responsible as humans and how we implement and how we go about doing them. And I think they can be used for good. There's always that element of people who won't do that, you know.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Very, very interesting. All right. Well, I think that's going to be a wrap on this. This has been a really, really interesting conversation. Like I said, we didn't really dive super deep into the tech pieces of it. But this was really just cool to just kind of see your kind of whole journey with this, how it, you just provided a lot of good nuggets of wisdom. So really, really appreciate that, Leanne. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much. And thanks so much for the genuine interest and the great questions. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, absolutely. I think this would be good for any of you guys listening to, you know, again, we've this is you're not the first marketplace or anything like we've interviewed, so there's definitely some common themes. If for those of you who listen, throughout all these and are loyal listeners, you can definitely see I'm picking up on threads of the same things as well. Which is also awesome because, like I said, I'm in the process of launching my own thing. So, kind of documenting these, it's really kind of a front row seat to learn from people like you. So this has been really fun. So awesome. Thank you so much, Leanne. So for those of you listening or watching, you can check out Plausible. It's PALUZZABLE.com. It's plausible.com. Highly recommend it. I've been checking it out. Definitely going to sign up for it. I'm not a uh, comedian. I was going to say comedic, but I knew that wasn't the right word. I'm not a comedian. I feel like I could be. Everyone's always said I should give it a go. I don't know if I'm that funny. I'm definitely quirky and weird type of guy. But I don't know if I could. Who knows? Maybe in the future. Um,
Yeah.
but we'll see. So, all right, Leanne. Anything else to add before we go?
Uh, no, I just say it, you know what? If people out there love comedy, and I mean, who doesn't? I mean, do you also not like music? Like, who are you? But
You
if
don't
you
like
like
money, like
breathing, check it out. Create a free account and explore, play around with it. Check it out. And like you said, Dan, if you ever attend a mic and you want to try it out, like go for it. This is the place to do it, and the community is really fabulous.
yeah. Do you guys have like an amateur night or anything like new beginners night or anything like that? That'd be a good idea.
Like you go to, you're going to be welcome at. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, that's going to be a wrap for this. Thank you so much, Leanne, for coming on. Check it out again. It's in the show notes as well, but plausible.com, the PALUZZABLE.com. All right, guys. Appreciate all of you. And again, once again, please like, rate, share, review the show, the podcast, wherever you're listening to this. Really, really appreciate it. Share this with anyone you think might be interested in Plausible or interested in listening to this. Really appreciate you. All right, guys, I will talk to you in the next one. See you then.